What's going on, everyone? Thanks so much for tuning in to another episode of the Ducks Dish podcast. I'm your host, Max Torres, the Scoop Duck on 3, coming to you on Tuesday, October 7th, 2025. Oregon is off their bye week, and Indiana week is here as Dan Lanning and the Ducks prepare to host the number 7 Indiana Hoosiers. That game on Saturday in Eugene. College game day is going to be there, and it'll be broadcast on CBS. Brad Nessler, Gary Danielson, and Jenny Dell on the call. And we're here with another edition of Tuesday TED Talk. And that is our friend Ted Leroux of That Show Out West and Scoop Duck on 3 contributor. Ted, how are you, my friend?
Doing good. Fresh off the bye week. Got the batteries recharged a little bit. Distanced myself from football. Got some camping in. Got to enjoy the fall colors and the great outdoors here in the Midwest. And now we're back into it. And not only are we back into it, but we're diving straight in with a top 10 matchup, as you mentioned. CBS and College Game Day and all of the things that are surrounding this matchup. It's going to be a good one, and I'm really looking forward to breaking it down here today.
I'm super excited for this one, Ted. And I think when I looked at Oregon's schedule in the preseason, I don't think that there were a whole lot of games that I had scheduled, aside from, of course, the game that we got through talking about last time I had you on, which was that Penn State game. Maybe you had the USC game circled as well. And I know some people are excited about that Iowa road trip as well. But I got to tell you, I wasn't expecting this Indiana game to be a top 10 matchup, but here we are. Ducks coming off that win over Penn State. Indiana is coming off that win over Iowa. And oddly enough, both teams are coming off of a bye. So I think that'll be an interesting little thing to note here as we head into this matchup. But not a whole lot of updates from Dan Lanning last night. As far as injuries go, Ducks are fairly healthy right now, which is exactly where you want to be. I thought one question that was interesting in particular was Lanning was asked about Jaleel Florence and his status with the team, and he was saying, well, he's there and he's going through practice with us. No Evan Stewart, Dylan Gresham, or Trey McNutt, as we probably expected. I think the guy you're looking out for is probably Gresham coming back from that neck injury. But the Florence update was interesting because, obviously this cornerback room is really, really good.
Yeah, it's a tough spot for Jaleel. I remember talking about that. I think it was earlier on this season where, when you look at what Finney's doing, we know Iffy was going to go in and have a significant role, obviously, and he's done that, and he's done really well. They brought in a transfer there, and Johnson, Sione Lalea, has been playing really good. You got Naheem Offord in there as well. Like, all of a sudden, you're stacking up 4 or 5 players just at the corner spot. And then you look to maybe the star position and what's like Jaden Kennedy's playing really good. You look at Dalen Austin's playing really good as well, and maybe some of these other positions on the field that aren't the safety position for Jaleel Florence to maybe plug in at. So it's just a tough spot because you look back at the 2023 season. I mean, he's probably out there as one of, if not the best corners on this team. And if he doesn't get injured in 2024. Do they go out and get a guy like Jabbar Muhammad? Maybe not. He was, I think, in position to certainly be the top corner on that team headed into last season, but it didn't work out that way, right? These are all hypotheticals, I think, for Jaleel, but that's kind of what happens when you have a program right now that is bringing in as much talent as Oregon does. You got the cream's going to rise to the top. And what have we seen this year? Freshmen are going to play. If you're good enough, you're old enough. I know we say that 80,000 times, and Dan says it 80,005 times, but it's the truth of the matter that this staff has proven that we are not scared of playing true freshmen, and these true freshmen not only step in, but they step in and play at a great to an elite level right away. De'Aaron Hill, DeCorian Moore, Brandon Finney Jr., who we already mentioned, like. It's just the facts, and sometimes guys that have are more veteran, maybe have been on this team for a couple of years, they kind of have a little bit of a setback. That might kind of be the last straw, and for them is maybe playing significant minutes and significant snaps in an Oregon uniform just because of the talent, especially in that corner and secondary room right now.
Yeah, you mentioned some of the young corners there and Brandon Finney and Ife Obadegwu, and I think I want to start there, Ted, for spots that I'm the most excited about with this matchup here. coming on Saturday, because this is going to be the biggest test for them. We kind of thought it was going to be Penn State with their new transfer portal receivers that they had added, but Andy Kotelnicki, for whatever reason, just didn't call for that many deep shots. So we didn't see those guys tested a whole lot. And now as we get ready for this Indiana game, Indiana has a couple of really talented wide receivers in Omar Cooper and Elijah Surratt, who have combined for 12 touchdowns on the year already. And then Fernando Mendoza is letting that thing fly. And he's someone that we're a little familiar with after he was at Cal in 2023. But he's playing just as good a football as probably Dante Moore right now. I mean, he's right there at the thick of the Heisman race, and these guys are pretty loaded.
Yeah, it is going to be the biggest challenge. I have that as a kind of a bullet point on my notes for when I record my preview right now. It's a much more dynamic passing game than Penn State was. When you talked about defending Penn State, it was about, hey, defensive line needs to play well. They're going to run the football. It's a more physical kind of style of team. Did Penn State have better wide receivers than years previous? Maybe by a little bit, but I think we saw the success that Oregon's defensive backs had, and they certainly won that battle. And I expected them to win that battle. Now you're taking a little bit of a step up. This is an Indiana offense that is centered around the RPO game. So these are corners that need to be, I think, be disciplined in exactly what they're doing out there in coverage. You kind of mentioned statistically what Omar Cooper and Elijah Surratt are doing right now. They can stretch the field. They can work over the middle. They can do a lot of different things. And Dan Lanning talked about this at his press conference. Like, their concepts offensively, they don't do like their main concepts. They don't do a ton of things that are different. You know, they're going to look to run the football effectively. I mentioned the RPO game, which, I was kind of watching back some of these games, specifically the Illinois game. And it's Fernando Mendoza has his eyes downfield on his top target. And he's riding the ball with the running back, and they're looking for the linebackers to kind of bite in and run that slant, behind. Saw that multiple times. And then what Dan was talking about, they'll do that. And then later in the game, they'll kind of do something to branch off of that, running kind of the same concept, running out of these same formations, or maybe they'll run the same concept out of a different formation. So Oregon just needs to be dialed in on those concepts and being able to stop that. But yeah, these corners, Brandon Finney and Iffy on the other side, I think for Oregon really needs to be able to do two things. First is being able to stop the run against Indiana. You don't have an RPO without the R, kind of a thing. And then the second thing, if they can't separate, if these wide receivers can't separate against these Oregon defensive backs, that takes away, of course, the second letter in the RPO game. So I'm actually, the more I kind of watch it, specifically that Iowa game, and Iowa, I think, laid a pretty good blueprint of what maybe Oregon wants to trot out there. But if they kind of do what the Hawkeyes were able to do in really doing a great job halting the run, playing on the other side of the line of scrimmage against this IU offensive line, and then sticking with these IU receivers in man coverage, I think that's a blueprint and a formula that we could see for Oregon to use, come out with a victory on Saturday.
And if I'm Oregon, specifically this Oregon defensive front, I'm going in this game with so much confidence.
Mm-hmm.
I think that there's a lot that's been said about, is that Oregon win over Penn State devalued now because UCLA beat Penn State, and what a dumpster fire it looks like it is now in the course of just 2 weeks over there with Penn State and all the pressure on Franklin now. But the Ducks were able to show that they can stop the run and they can out physical their opponent. So you have to think that Oregon's got a lot of confidence and ability to stop the run in this game against Iowa. And one of the areas that I'm going to be most excited to see this weekend, Ted, is how Oregon defends the quarterback run, because I don't know about you, but there were just so many times it felt like when Oregon had Penn State in 3rd and long, and then, hey, there you go. It's Drew Aller slipping out of the pocket, stepping up and eating up yards with his legs. So I don't know that that's necessarily something you can like really, really prepare for as the defense necessarily, because when the pocket collapses, the quarterback just has to make a play. But that just goes back to your defensive lineman finishing the play and sacking the quarterback. So I think it's going to be really key for Oregon here in this game to take what the offense gives them. We talk so much about taking what the defense gives you,
Yeah.
conversely, but get off the field, man. Get off the field. Don't give Indiana extra drives and free yards. So I got a lot of respect for Fernando Mendoza and what he's been able to do in his college career, and he's got a lot better system and a lot better weapons at his disposal now in Indiana.
Yeah, let's kind of rewind back to last year when Indiana faced off against Ohio State, when they faced off against Notre Dame. And what was the big problem? They couldn't hold up at the line of scrimmage. That was a pretty good Ohio State front last year, and they just kept on getting after Curtis Rohr. Couldn't run the ball at all during that game. It was the same kind of deal against a really good front against Notre Dame out there in the playoffs. And you look to the offensive line this year. They brought in Pat Coogan, the transfer from Notre Dame at center. And I think that's been an improvement over at the center position. But I look to the rest of this offensive line. I think it's specifically on I believe it's the left. Actually, I think it's the right side. It's the right side. Both Bray Lynch at guard and Khalil Benson at tackle. Once again, we go back to that Iowa game. Okay, if Tosh Lapoy, Dan Lynn, and this defensive staff, and of course fans of this team, they want to look at how to attack Indiana, I think this Iowa tape is a good reason why, because that's a good Iowa defensive line. Now, I believe Oregon is a little bit of a step up from talent-wise on the defensive front than Iowa is. But, you've got Bray Lynch at guard and Khalil Benson at tackle on that side. They are getting beat pretty consistently against Iowa. I mean, Bray Lynch had a sub 30 PFF pass block grade in that game. Khalil Benson was sub 40 from a pass block grade according to PFF during that game. And the film tells that same story, where they're just being able to beat, whether it is in run, these are pass block grades, but also against the run, Iowa was able to play in the backfield as well. And then considering what we just saw from Oregon against Penn State, specifically today's birthday boy, Mr. Bear Alexander. We know a birthday boy, Deer Hill, had a great game against Penn State, but today Bear is celebrating a birthday on Tuesday. If he can play at the level alongside Amari Washington that they've shown that they can play at, along with Mateo, along with Tatum, who is my early defensive MVP so far this season, I think Oregon can have a lot of success against the run, against the pass, and like it was proven last year, if you can win and dominate at the line of scrimmage, you're going to have success. You're going to get this Indiana offense out of rhythm. Dan also said he focused on a word that's very important when you talk about the Hoosiers: timing. It is a very timing-based offense. If you get Indiana off by 3/4 of a second, a second and a half, whatever it be, they're going to find themselves not having as much success. And I think that's putting it lightly. So I think Oregon does have an advantage on their defensive line versus Indiana's offensive line. And if they get the timing off, they get them out of rhythm, you stop the run, corners buckle down on the outside. I think that's a formula like Iowa was able to demonstrate, where you play man coverage out there instead of zone. I think it's much easier for Indiana's offense to have more success against zone than it is against man. You dominate the line of scrimmage, and Iowa brought a lot of pressure in this game. Iowa blitzed 66% of the time. So I'm very curious to see if Tosh will do that. And I think Tosh has been very confident in his front four and what they've been able to do this season. So I'm curious to see if they're able to replicate that part of the game plan that we saw from the black and gold in that matchup. But, I just kind of look around, and I've got confidence that Oregon can get this Indiana offense out of rhythm because of the matchup in the trenches.
If I'm Tosh Lapoy, I am confident in the defensive front, because Amari Washington has been what we thought he was going to be. It looks like he's taken a step forward. His first step is lightning fast. I think that's a huge part of what's making him stand out. And it's got to be an encouraging development. I think it certainly is one that Bear Alexander seems to be maybe about to turn the corner and turn that new leaf. Because a lot of people had him penciled in as a starter next to Amari Washington this offseason, Ted, but that wasn't necessarily the case, at least not right out of the gate. So if you can have those two holding it down the interior, Mateo is Mateo, and Tatum Tuioti has been playing some fantastic football, and he could very well be playing himself into the NFL draft discussion, because he was my defensive MVP as well for the Oregon Ducks so far when we were doing our roundtables over there on Scoop Duck this past week to get us through the bye. So I'm really excited to see what he can do and try to turn it up a notch. And then just in the secondary, I think with this team being one that likes to air it out a bit more, I'm ready for some of these DBs to make plays, man. I mean, it
Right.
feels like we haven't really seen too much of that since, I mean, obviously Dylan Thieneman in the Penn State game. That was huge. I can't gloss over that. But aside from that, these guys haven't really been thrown at that much. It feels like
Mhm.
that we haven't really seen a DB make like a crazy play
Yeah.
since maybe the spring game when Iffy caused that fumble or grabbed it. He caused it and then Blake Purchase grabbed it, I think.
Mhm.
So that obviously wasn't a slight or a shot at the secondary, but like I'm just ready for them. But hey, balls in the air. I'm betting on those 6 foot plus and fast DBs, specifically at corner, to step up and make a play.
Well, I think the reason that people aren't taking shots at them is because they're really good, and they're
Right.
specifically Iffy, and especially Brandon Finney Jr. I think Brandon is the best cover corner on this team. I think he's been playing outstanding, and he's got rules. Rules are rules. He's got to play 2 more years of football, which is scary, I think, for opposing teams in the Big Ten being able to throw the ball on Oregon in the coming seasons. But I think that's a big reason why we haven't seen a ton of success, is because these guys are just shutting it down. Corner is one of those positions where stats don't really tell a lot of the story of how good, or, we'll just say how good they are right now. If they put on a lot of zero, a lot of times, hey, you look at PBUs, you look at INTs. If guys have big numbers in those specific categories, it means that they're getting thrown to a lot in that direction. And credit to them, they're making plays in those situations. But I just think right now, specifically Brandon and then Iffy as well, they're just not throwing in these guys' direction because they're just nothing's open on either side right now. So yeah, this in theory is going to be an opportunity for them to be tested to see how they really stand up in a dynamic offense that looks to create big plays down the field and against some talented wide receivers. I think, like, we talk about the defensive front and how I believe that I think there's an advantage up there. And I think that they can have a lot of success. Like, if they can't run the ball on first down, they can't run the ball on second down, you get into your 3rd and 7, 3rd and 8, 3rd and 9, whatever, you're going to see Indiana really go to the air a lot more. So especially if what I expect to happen is Oregon's defensive front plays well, then you're going to see the secondary tested that much more, because Indiana is going to look to put the ball into the air and try to convert some of these 3rd and longs. We'll see if Oregon's corners can kind of hang on for a little bit, and then I think another part of this is how quickly the pass rush can get there. If you get to 3rd and 7, you get to 3rd and 8, you get to 3rd and 9. I talked about maybe some subpar play in their last game against Iowa on the outside of tackle. If Mateo and Tatum and those guys, they're winning battles, now all of a sudden Fernando has a second and a half, 2 seconds to throw. Maybe instead of like 2.5 to 3 seconds to throw the ball down the field. Now the corners maybe don't have to do much work, right? That's a complementary relationship between the defensive line, the pass rush, and the secondary. So I don't know. The more I really dove in and kind of rewatch some of these Indiana games, I think the more confident I feel in that relationship that the secondary and the defensive line can have some success.
And one thing too on that note, Ted, with the pass rush, we haven't seen Tosh Lapoy dial up quite as much defensive back blitzes. I know that was something we saw a lot from Tyshim Johnson last year. Dylan Thieneman, I think, is one that did send some pressure in the Penn State game, but I'm curious if that card will get called a little bit more in this weekend's game against Indiana. But we know that the Oregon defensive front has to be playing with a whole lot of confidence right now. And this is just a huge game for them. You go from a top 10 matchup to, hey, here's another top 10 matchup for you. And you got to like that this game is in Eugene. We'll have much more on Oregon versus Indiana right after this. Duck fans, are you going to an Oregon game this year? If you are, the Oakway Lifestyle Center at the corner of Oakway and Coburg is the destination for Duck fans. Whatever you're looking for, they've got it all. Get a bite to eat at Center River Brewing or PF Chang's. Check out shops like Lululemon or Nordstrom Rack. Need a place to stay? Book your lodging at the Hyatt Place at Oakway Center and visit their rooftop bar. The Oakway Lifestyle Center is walking distance from Autzen Stadium, has something for everybody, and is a great post-game place to celebrate another Duck victory. Max Torres of Scoop Duck on 3 here with you on the Duck Dish podcast, joined by my good friend Ted Leroux, host of That Show Out West. It's Tuesday, October 7th, and we're glad to have you guys along with us today to get you ready for the big matchup between Oregon and Indiana. Ted, let's hop on over to Oregon's offense a little bit here, but
Mhm.
anything is fair play in this great edition of Tuesday TED Talk. One of the biggest updates that we got on Oregon's offense last week, Ted, was that Mekhi Hughes has asked to redshirt, and Oregon is going to honor that. So I think that this has to be one of the most surprising developments of the year for Oregon. You certainly don't need me to tell you, but in case you're listening to us for the first time, folks, Mekhi Hughes came to Oregon as the number one running back in the transfer portal, 1,400 yards and over 10 touchdowns. I want to say it was, might have been closer to 20 last year at Tulane, but man, the emergence of true freshman phenoms, De'Aaron Hill Jr. and Jordan Davison, as well as the return of a healthy Noah Whittington, have really kind of left Hughes as the odd man out here. So that was one of the big surprises from the bye week. I don't think I expected that. But at the same time, as far as like just requesting a red shirt, but at the same time, like you look at how the rest of the room is playing, and like we're not even talking about Dink Riggs, we're not even talking about Jay Harris, because De'Aaron Hill and Jordan Davison have set foot on campus and they're saying, I'm too good to be off the field.
Running back room has been completely flipped upside down from, I think, where a lot of people thought coming into the year. I think a lot of people were thinking, all right, Mekhi Hughes, Noah Whittington, there's your 1A and 1B, and then spelling them would be one Dink Riggs. There was a lot of anticipation for what Dink would be. And then, like, I think people thought, okay, Mekhi and Noah, they're going to have themselves a great year. And then that's when you see De'Aaron Hill in 2026. That's when you see Jordan Davis in 2026. Everything's been sped ahead. Everything is fast forward right now for this team. Okay, like that's just the way it is. I know Dan Lanning was asked about that during the press conference, and it didn't really mean much to him. People like me and you and a lot of other people talking about how this team is ahead of schedule, but it is. That's the fact of the matter. And running back is a perfect example where, yeah, you do have Noah, but that's like the one part that we thought coming into the season that has like actually, kind of lived up to the expectations that we had. Everything else, these true freshmen are just playing fantastic football. It's amazing to see how they're playing. The explosiveness of De'Aaron Hill when he touches the ball, good things happen. And then Jordan Davison is just absolutely inevitable in those short yardage and goal line situations.
Yeah, I mean, and for him to be playing as well as he has been right away is a little bit of a surprise. I mean, just for me, someone who's seen him quite a bit coming out of high school, like he didn't seem like he was as dominant as he had been in previous seasons during his senior year at Mater Dei, but he's gotten to Oregon and just done a tremendous job to make himself ready to be that short yardage guy. And he's much more than that, just the short yardage guy. He's been a very effective lead blocker, and I think we're going to see his role continue to grow moving forward, of course, with Mekhi Hughes requesting a redshirt, freeing up a little bit of carries, just giving us some clarity here as both Hill and Davison have burned their red shirts now, one of 6 true freshmen to do so, with Decorian Moore being the other notable one on offense. I'm excited to see what Dante Moore can do this week. I mean, when am I not? But how do you follow up a performance like that? Easily the biggest game he had started to date in his college career and his best performance to date. I don't think you can say enough good things about how Dante Moore handled himself in Happy Valley, and now he gets to return home to what should be a raucous Autzen Stadium. Oregon plays their best ball at home. They've only lost one game under Dan Lanning in Eugene, which was to Washington. I was at that game. What an absolutely brutal ending that one was, with Bo Nix getting hurt in that game. But I think Oregon's got a lot to their advantage playing at home, and I'm gonna look for another great game from that Oregon offensive line after they held up against Penn State.
Yeah, that matchup for Oregon's O-line against Indiana's D-line is very interesting. Indiana, for players that are playing significant time, they got one guy that's over 300 pounds, Tyree Tucker. Now, Tyree Tucker is a really good player at nose tackle, but this is overall a smaller defensive line going up against what is I'd say it's a pretty big, that's a pretty big offensive line for Alik Terry's group right now. So I think the big thing for them against an athlete, maybe a smaller but more athletic Hoosier defensive line. You got to engage and you got to stay engaged. You can't let these guys shed blocks. You can't let these guys use their quickness to get in the backfield. If Oregon can engage and stay engaged, like I said before, on some of these blocks, I think they could have a lot of success, not only protecting Dante Moore, but also running the ball. And then you kind of look to how Indiana, now they did not have D'Angelo Pons, their top corner, last week. That forced them to play a little bit more zone coverage. And I'm watching, Mark Gronowski and Iowa kind of throw the ball, and they're having, Iowa's a little, well, let's just put it nicely, Iowa's a little bit more limited offensively than Oregon is. But, they're still finding some things in the pass game against the zone coverage. So you give Dante time to throw, and they're running zone back there. And we'll see how much there is with Pons back. Do they run a little bit more man? But either way, I think Dante can have a really big day. I think there's the potential for him to really shred up this Indiana defense. I honestly believe that is something that could happen if there is time. I think they could have a lot of success. Now, they do have some linebackers that can certainly fly to the football, led by Aiden Fisher. But, yeah, this is I think Dante can have a lot of success, no doubt, in this game.
I do too. And when we saw all these different playmakers step up and make big time catches for Oregon, whether it's Kenyon Sadiq or Jacorian Moore, I think that when you see the stable of talent that he's working with, it just makes his job that much easier. Yeah. So I think Oregon, I'm going to be curious to see what kind of game we get from Malik Benson, because he was a little quiet in that Penn State game, and maybe that was part of their game plan, and Penn State really honed in on him. Gary Bryant Jr. was phenomenal in that Penn State game, stepping up to make that touchdown catch in the second overtime. And we didn't see Cooper Perry, which I thought was interesting. So I wonder if they're going to maybe redshirt him after he looked like he was on track to burn his red shirt. Jeremiah McClellan has been very solid as well. So this Oregon receiver room, I think it was a little bit smaller as far as the number of bodies that you had to work with, but they've been every bit as efficient as you've needed. Jacorian Moore has made some really, really big catches like we saw in that Penn State game. And I'm hoping that we can see more from Jamari Johnson. I think he's someone who should be featured a lot more, because Oregon's got not one, but two great tight ends.
Yeah, I mean, it's when you got as much weapons as they do on the field, it's certainly tough to feature everybody. But yeah, Jamari, I would expect him, as players they continue to key on Sadiq and Benson and Moore, he's a guy I think that could be a lot more involved. And kind of getting back to your point with maybe someone like Cooper Perry not playing, it seems like they've really trimmed down their wide receiver group. It is a very clear top three right now with Jacorian Moore and Malik Benson on the outside and Gary Bryant at that slot receiver on the inside. And then like Jeremiah McClellan is that next guy. I know Justice Lowe has been a little bit banged up this season, but we've seen him, when he's been healthy sparingly out there. So we'll see where his role and, really comes in, because he maybe seems to be that next guy coming out of the slot, potentially behind Gary Bryant Jr. So it is very much trimmed down. It is slimmed down. And then especially when you consider the ability for Sadiq to play on the outside and Jamari Johnson at tight end and an 11 personnel look, that kind of trims it down even more. So I feel really good. And I think Ross Douglas and company, they were able to really key in on to who their top three were going to be pretty early in this season. And we've seen that top three really perform well and really stand out.
The last thing I want to talk about today on this episode, Ted, is special teams, because that was one of the first things, I think it was the first thing that Lanning pointed to when talking about Indiana in his Monday night presser. And I don't think we've necessarily had that moment for Oregon yet where it's like, hey, it's time for special teams to be special and make some special plays, whether that's a return, whether that's like, I guess we did see some blocks early on with Jeremiah McClellan, right?
Yeah.
But specifically in the return game, I think if there's a moment in this game where the offense is struggling a little bit, or it's maybe a little bit more of a defensive shootout like we saw against Penn State, I think that could be where Oregon gets, a differentiating play, like a game-changing play. And they have some really good return specialists.
Yep.
But we haven't seen a whole lot since the Noah Whittington and Tez Johnson returns from last year. And there's plenty of talent there returning kicks and punts. So that's one area that I'd love to see a little bit of fireworks from the Ducks.
Yeah, and Indiana got the scoring started against Illinois, that big 63-10 win with a punt block from the aforementioned D'Angelo Pons, and he scooped it up and went into the end zone. So they've been really good on special teams. They need to be able to protect the punter, or just even better, keep the punter off the field. Just have really good offense. That'll certainly help as well. So, and then I think there's going to be a game this season where you get an explosive return, Gary Bryant Jr., Decorian Moore back there as well. It just seems like it's gonna happen. We just don't know when it's gonna happen. So if they can really spark a big special teams play and win that battle, it's an Indiana program that really predicates themselves on great special teams play. So we'll see if Oregon can spark that. One interesting thing to note is last year's game where Indiana faced Ohio State. Caleb Downs took a punt back for a touchdown. Now, I don't remember the exact figure, but I believe it was something like it was the first time in like 8 to 10 years that Ohio State had a punt return for a touchdown against Indiana. Will that happen? Obviously you said last year in the Boise State game is when Oregon had some special team success. Will they kind of revitalize that against Indiana? We'll see, but it just seems like, there's just too much talent back there with those guys that I mentioned for them to be kind of held to a zero, once all the way through like November or into December. So it seems like they're going to get one. It's just a matter of time.
Well, we'll see when the Ducks get that one. Bound to happen eventually, you would think, with all the talented players that they have. Ted, it's going to be a great week, man. We got a lot of awesome content coming out over on Scoop Duck. Going to be here on the podcast as well. I am scheduled to be in Eugene for this game, so I could not be more excited about that. Usually try to get up to at least one game a year, and you just can't draw it up other than a better weekend than this one that we have on our hands here, Ted. But anything else that you wanted to add here, kind of final thoughts or anything else you have going on that show out west?
Yeah, we're going to be previewing this game on Wednesday, going to be predicting this game on Friday. So make sure you tune in for those. It's going to be a really fun matchup. But the more I talk to you, the more I kind of looked at these rewatches before the game. I'm more confident in Oregon than maybe I was before. I'm like, okay, this is a better Indiana team than it was last season. But then kind of when you watch where maybe some of the weaknesses, slight or maybe a little bit bigger weaknesses for Indiana are, they're somewhat similar to what they were last year, and I think those kind of equate into strengths, specifically on how Oregon's trenches played against Penn State, and they proved that they can play that physical type of football game. So I'm confident, and the fact of the matter is, when you go into Watson Stadium, it's tough. But all the way, I think it was 2004 was the last time a current Big Ten team beat Oregon at Watson, and it was these Indiana Hoosiers. I could have the year wrong there. But yeah, so that's a little interesting tidbit coming into this game as well. But it should be a really fun game, really fun weekend.
There you go. It's going to be a fun one, 12:30 p.m. Pacific kickoff between the Ducks and the Hoosiers. Should be a pretty significant recruiting weekend as well, I would think, for Oregon. However, I'll just note that an earlier kickoff usually doesn't tend to favor more big-time recruits being able to make it out. But we're going to have you guys covered every step of the way over at Scoop Duck. Come and join the party. $1 gets your membership started, and you get a complimentary year of access to The Athletic. If you want to find more of Ted, you can follow him at Ted on the Ducks. Find more of me anywhere at Torres Sports, and subscribe to the Scoop Duck on their YouTube channel. While you're at it, share the show with your friends, with your family, with another Duck fan. But until next time, thank you guys so much for tuning in.